What should I do when my own daughter begs me not to call myself her father? That was the first thing I heard after dragging my old suitcase up to her perfect white porch. 3 days on buses and trains, crossing endless miles just to see her again. And the moment she opened the door, Claire whispered, "Please, don't tell anyone you're my dad. Just say you're an old family friend." Ended to a many. Her words hit harder than any fist ever could. I had imagined a hug, a tearful reunion, maybe her children running into my arms. Instead, she looked at me like I was a secret she couldn't afford for anyone to know. I stood there, boots scuffed from years of labor, staring at the gleam of her wedding ring and the neat curls of her hair. Behind her stretched a neighborhood too clean, too polished, the kind of place where men like me only showed up to fix broken fences or haul away trash. She shifted nervously, her manicured fingers twisting at the edge of her blouse, as if the sight of me might shatter the life she had built here. "Dad, I'm serious," she whispered again, her voice sharp with panic. "If the neighbors ask, you're just someone I knew back in Ohio. Please." I felt my throat close. Every sacrifice, every night. I worked double shifts. Every meal I skipped so she could eat. Every tool I sold to cover her tuition burned in my chest. And now she wanted me erased. The sound of laughter floated from a house across the street. A car door slammed. Claire's eyes darted toward the noise, terrified. She couldn't risk anyone knowing that the man with the rough hands and tired face standing in front of her was the same man who once carried her on his shoulders, who once promised her mother he'd raise her the best he could. I tightened my grip on the suitcase. I forced my mouth into something that looked like a smile. "All right," I said, my voice low. "An old friend." Cresting. But in that instant, something inside me broke so deep I wondered if it could ever be repaired. I did not sleep much the night before I left. My old house creaked with every gust of wind, the kind of sound that reminded me how long it had been since I could afford real repairs. I packed slowly, folding shirts that had seen too many years, sliding in a photo frame with a cracked corner, and finally tucking my worn wallet into the side pocket. That wallet had carried the proof of every choice I ever made for Claire. Bank slips, receipts for tools sold, the small card her mother had written before she passed, reminding me to always protect our daughter. Claire never knew the full weight of it. How could she? She was just a girl when I worked back-to-back shifts at the plant. She was in bed when I came home, so tired I sometimes slept in the chair by the door. She was in school when I took the construction jobs on weekends, hammering nails until my hands bled. She only saw the smile I forced on my face when she asked if I was tired. I always said no. She didn't need to know the truth. I still remember her laughter in those years. The way her eyes lit up when I handed her a new pair of sneakers, even though it meant I would patch the soles of my boots with duct tape again. The way she cried with joy when I surprised her with a second-hand bicycle, even though it nearly broke me to pay for it. Those memories carried me more than any paycheck ever did. When her mother got sick, the world collapsed on both of us. Claire was only 12. I watched her stand beside the hospital bed, clutching her mother's frail hand, trying to be brave. I promised her then, through my own tears, that I would take care of her. That no matter what it cost, she would never feel alone. That promise shaped everything. I sold off my truck when college tuition bills came. I gave up weekends to pick up side jobs just so she could live in a dorm instead of commuting from home. I kept nothing for myself. Every dollar, every ounce of strength, every dream I once had, I poured it all into her future. I remember the call the day she got accepted to law school. Her voice shook with excitement. She said, "Dad, this is because of you." I sat at the kitchen table, my hands covered in grease from a repair job. and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, but because I finally believed all the sacrifices meant something. Even after she graduated, I kept pushing. I worked until my back screamed. I cashed out my savings. And when she called about the house, her dream house, she called it, I drained what little I had left to help her. I told myself it was worth it. Because it was for her family. For the grandchildren I hadn't met yet. Every nail I drove. Every hour I sweated under the sun. Every night I went to bed hungry. It was all for her. I carried her dreams like bricks on my back. And now, standing on her porch, hearing her ask me to be someone else, I wondered if those bricks had crushed me for nothing. I thought about her as a child, running through the yard barefoot, calling out, "Daddy, look at me." I thought about the little girl who begged me to stay a few minutes longer at bedtime, who once whispered, "You're my hero." How had we come from that to this? The train pulled into the station just after noon. I stepped down with my suitcase in one hand and the folded bus ticket still crumpled in my pocket. My knees ached from sitting too long, and my back protested every movement. But when I looked around at the glass buildings and wide, spotless streets of Claire's new city, I felt smaller than ever. I called her before I hailed a cab. She answered quickly, her voice bright but rushed. "Dad, just come straight here. Don't talk to anyone along the way. Just text me when you're close." Her words set my stomach twisting, but I kept quiet. I didn't want to start an argument before I even saw her. The cab driver whistled low when I gave him the address. "That's a fancy spot," he said. "Folks there live different." I pressed my lips together and stared out the window as the neighborhoods changed. Old brick apartments gave way to newer houses, then to streets lined with tall trees and immaculate lawns. By the time we turned into Claire's subdivision, every yard looked like it had been cut with scissors. Every driveway gleamed with cars that cost more than I had earned in years. When we pulled up to her house, my breath caught. It was large, white, and perfect, with a porch wide enough for gatherings and flower beds bursting with color. It looked like the kind of home I used to drive past with Claire when she was little, pointing out the lights at Christmas and imagining what life would be like inside. Back then, she would grab my hand and whisper, "One day, Dad, one day we'll live in a house like that." I know. I paid the driver more than I should have and stood at the end of the driveway. My boots sank slightly into the flawless asphalt, and suddenly I felt ashamed. The house towered over me, pristine and new, while I looked like I had dragged the dust of 100 work sites across the country. My shirt clung to me with sweat, and my suitcase bore the scars of years of travel. Claire opened the door before I reached it. She smiled, but her smile was tight, brittle. She glanced quickly to the left and right, scanning the neighbors' yards. A man across the street waved while adjusting his sprinkler. Claire raised her hand in return, her expression perfect, before turning back to me with panic flickering in her eyes. "Dad," she whispered sharply, "please remember what I said. Don't call me your daughter. Just say we've known each other for years. Just an old friend. All right?" The neighbor strolled over, wiping his hands on his shorts, his face open with friendliness. "New visitor?" he asked. "From out of town?" I forced a smile that made my cheeks ache. "Yeah. Long trip. I'm an old friend of Claire's." The lie burned as it left my mouth. "Welcome," he said warmly, shaking my hand before walking back across his perfect lawn. His children's laughter echoed in the air. My chest ached at the sound. Claire touched my arm lightly, her nails cold against my skin. "Come inside," she said, "before anyone else notices." And it's low, inside. The air smelled of candles and fresh paint. The walls gleamed with framed photos of vacations, smiling children in crisp uniforms, and her husband shaking hands with people in suits. My eyes searched instinctively for one picture of me, one sign that I had been part of her story. But the walls held none. Every surface looked polished. Every corner felt staged. And with each step I took across the hardwood floors, I felt myself shrinking further from the man who had built her dreams with his own hands. I had imagined 100 ways this reunion might go. None of them involved hearing my daughter tell me to hide who I was. Yet that was the reality the moment I crossed her threshold. Claire closed the front door quickly, as if sealing away a secret before it could escape. She smoothed her blouse and forced another smile. But her eyes betrayed her panic. Her husband, Mark, appeared in the hallway, phone in hand, his voice still sharp from a business call. He ended it with a confident laugh, then looked at me like I was a stranger who had wandered in off the street. "So this is John, right?" His handshake was firm, professional. I had shaken enough men's hands in my life to know when someone was measuring me, weighing my worth in an instant. "Yes," I answered quietly. "An old friend." "For the lie hung heavy in the room. Claire's shoulders relaxed the moment I said it, but mine stiffened like steel. My jaw ached from clenching it too hard. Mark led us into the kitchen, where marble countertops gleamed under perfect lighting. A bowl of fruit sat in the center, spotless and polished, as if no one had ever touched it. The refrigerator hummed quietly, nothing like the one back home that rattled when the motor kicked on. Claire gestured toward the living room. "Let me show you around. May today." I followed her through rooms that felt like pages torn from a magazine. Plush couches, coordinated curtains, photos of family vacations, ski trips in Colorado, summer days in Italy, birthdays celebrated with towering cakes. Her children smiled out from the frames, dressed in expensive clothes, their eyes bright. But nowhere in those glossy images was there any trace of me. "Beautiful family," I managed, though my throat tightened on the words. She paused for half a second, just long enough for guilt to flicker across her face. "Yes, we've been very fortunate." Then she turned quickly, her heels tapping across the floor as if speed alone could erase the silence between us. Later, while she busied herself setting a dinner table that looked too fine to be used, she leaned close and whispered, "Please don't mention anything about the money, or how you helped me with the down payment. Mark thinks it was handled differently." And then were the no. Her words cut sharper than knives. Not only did she want me to hide my role as her father, she wanted me to erase every sacrifice that had built the walls around us. I wanted to shout. I wanted to slam my hand on that spotless table and demand she acknowledge the truth. But when I looked at her trembling hands as she straightened the silverware, I saw the fear etched into her face. Fear of being judged. Fear of not belonging. Fear of being seen with me. So I stayed silent. I carried my suitcase upstairs to the guest room, she pointed out. The bedspread was crisp white. The pillows lined up perfectly. A card on the nightstand reading, "Welcome, guests." I set my bag down and stared at the words. Guest. That's what I was in my own daughter's home. Through the window, I watched the neighbors mowing their lawns, their children chasing each other across perfect grass. From behind the glass, I felt the same as I had on the porch. Unwanted, rewritten out of the story of my daughter's life. And for the first time in years, I wondered if she had ever truly wanted me there at all. By the time the sun dipped low, the dining room shimmered with golden light, bouncing off crystal glasses and silver cutlery. Claire had arranged everything as if the president himself were coming. China plates set in perfect lines, candles flickering just enough to soften the edges of the room. I was placed at the far end of the long oak table, a seat that looked more like a visitor's corner than a place of honor. Mark sat at the head, confident and polished, carving steaks with the precision of a man who had never worried about making ends meet. Claire floated around him, smiling brightly, correcting the children with gentle taps on their wrists, smoothing over every silence like a hostess trained for perfection. Their teenage daughter, Emily, barely looked up from her phone. Their son, Tyler, tapped one leg under the table in restless rhythm, his earbuds half hidden by his hair. To them, I was just another adult filling a chair. Only the youngest, little Noah in his high chair, reached for me with sticky fingers and wide eyes. When he smiled, it was unguarded and pure, and for a brief second, I felt seen. Mark lifted his glass. To new opportunities, he said. I was named senior partner this month. It means more security for us, more options for the kids. We're moving up. His voice carried pride, but also the certainty of someone used to applause. Claire beamed at him. And last week we were at the Carter's charity gala. So many influential people. You wouldn't believe the conversations we had. Her words sparkled like jewels, each one polished for display. I cleared my throat during a pause. I had a good year too. Finished a big renovation back home. New foundation. Custom cabinets. The family was real happy. It is commente. The air shifted. Forks paused. Mark reached for his wine as if suddenly fascinated by the label. Claire's smile stiffened. And then, too quickly, she turned to her husband, Mark. Why don't you tell us about that merger case you've been handling? And just like that, my words vanished into the polished wood of the table. I chewed in silence, each bite harder to swallow. My mind drifted back to other dinners, ones with paper plates and soup stretched thin, where Claire and I laughed over simple meals, where she told me about her dreams of college and whispered how proud she was to have me. Those memories clashed with the quiet around me now, broken only by the buzz of Mark's phone and Emily's sighs. Noah gurgled again, stretching his small hand toward me. His tiny fingers brushed against mine. Warm and trusting, my throat tightened. In that crowded, cold dining room, his touch was the only reminder that family meant more than appearances. Claire noticed and quickly shifted the baby's chair closer to her. She laughed too loudly, filling the silence. Dad. Noah's just curious. He reaches for everyone. But I knew the truth. He wasn't reaching for everyone. He was reaching for me. Dinner dragged on like a performance. Mark told stories about clients overseas. Claire bragged about new friends in the neighborhood. The kids begged to be excused. And I sat at the far end, listening, my plate half full, my heart heavier with every passing moment. When it ended, they left the table one by one, dispersing like actors after a play. Mark returned to his office, phone already pressed to his ear. Emily vanished upstairs, Tyler close behind. Claire lifted Noah and carried him off for his bath. That left me alone, staring at the spotless table, hearing the echo of silverware against china, and wondering how I had gone from the center of my daughter's world to a forgotten guest in her house. The guest room felt more like a hotel than a place meant for family. White sheets tucked too tightly, pillows lined in perfect symmetry, a faint scent of detergent mixed with lavender. I lay awake long after the house grew quiet. The silence pressed on me, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of settling wood. Sleep wouldn't come. My thoughts raced back to the dinner table, to the way Claire had steered conversation away from me like I was a dangerous subject, to how Mark's eyes slid past me as if I were a shadow on the wall. And yet, somewhere deep in my chest, I knew the truth that none of this life would exist without me. I sat up, pulling my wallet from my pants folded on the chair. The leather was cracked, edges frayed from decades of use. Inside were the documents I had carried like a second heart. I unfolded the first. A property contract with my signature bold across the bottom. My hands shook as I read it again in the dim light of my phone. 80% ownership. $150,000 wired from my account. Drained from a lifetime of savings and the sale of every tool I ever owned. Claire's name was there too, in small print, next to the word contribution. Contribution 0. The weight of it hit me fresh. Every dollar I had scraped together from years of sacrifice lived in these walls. Yet I had been erased from the pictures on the mantel. Erased from the story told to neighbors. Erased from the family gathered around the table. A floorboard creaked overhead. My heart raced, but the sound faded. I held my phone steady, snapping photos of each page, proof that I wasn't just some visitor from the past. Proof that this house stood on the back of my labor. Thirst pulled me toward the kitchen. I crept down the hall, careful to avoid the spots that had groaned underfoot earlier. I filled a glass with cold water from the refrigerator dispenser. Its hum so different from the rattling machine back in my own home. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught a door slightly ajar near the laundry room. Something about the crack of light pulled me closer. Inside, shelves, stacked with labeled boxes, lined the walls, seasonal clothes, holiday decorations, and then, tucked between them, a folder marked in neat handwriting. Important documents. My pulse quickened. I opened it slowly, scanning mortgage papers, insurance policies, and copies of the deed. Mark's name appeared on the monthly payments, but the ownership still carried mine. Bold and undeniable. I snapped more photos, each click of the phone camera echoing in the quiet like hammer blows. There it was, the truth. Clear and simple. Without me, there was no house, no security, no polished image for Claire to display to her neighbors. I stood there for a long time, the folder heavy in my hands, all the lies, all the shame, all the distance. It didn't erase what I had built. The foundation was mine, and deep inside, I felt the first stirrings of resolve. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the wide windows, falling across a room that felt too polished for real living. I had spent half the night staring at those papers, scrolling through the photos I had taken, replaying every sacrifice that had brought me here. The truth weighed heavier than sleep. By dawn, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. When I walked downstairs, the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Mark sat at the table in a pressed shirt, laptop open, phone already buzzing with messages. Claire moved quickly between the counter and the dining room, setting out breakfast like a woman staging another performance. The kids shuffled in, eyes glued to their screens. To them, I was still just the quiet guest in the corner. I cleared my throat. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Claire. Mark. We need to talk. And never one. Claire froze mid-step. Her hand hovered over the stack of plates, her eyes flicking nervously toward her husband. Mark barely looked up at first, until he heard the tone in my voice. He closed the laptop slowly, like a man preparing for a negotiation he hadn't expected. "What is it?" he asked. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the folder of images, and slid it across the table toward him. Contracts, bank slips, receipts, all with my name at the center. "This house," I said quietly, "stands because of me. 80% down payment. My savings. My life's work. Without it, none of this exists." Well, the room fell silent. Even the children looked up from their devices, sensing the weight of something breaking. Claire's face drained of color. "Dad. Please, don't." I cut in. "Don't ask me to hide again. I've been hiding since I arrived. Hiding who I am. Hiding what I've done. But the truth is right here. In black and white. It's not a no." Mark picked up the phone, scrolling through the photos with a lawyer's eye. His jaw tightened with each swipe. "Why are you showing us this now?" he asked carefully. "Because last night I realized I've been erased," I answered. "Not just from the pictures on your walls. Not just from the story you tell your neighbors, but from my own daughter's life. And I won't allow that anymore. It's not a knot of the Claes and Dace." Claire's hands trembled. She set the plates down too hard. The sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. "I only wanted to protect us," she whispered. "You don't understand how people here judge. They would look at you, at your clothes, your hands, and they'd see the man who built the foundation under your feet." I interrupted. "They'd see the father who gave everything so you could stand here." "Way there see." Her eyes filled with tears. But she didn't move closer. Mark leaned back, exhaling through his nose, his confidence cracking. He had built his life on contracts. And now those very contracts proved he wasn't the one holding power. For the first time since I'd stepped onto that porch, I felt something shift. No longer a guest. No longer a secret. For the first time, I was simply what I had always been. The man who built this family. And the one person who couldn't be written out of it. Claire's knees gave out before the kitchen island. She caught herself on the edge and slid down until she sat on the tile. Arms wrapped around her stomach like she was holding something broken inside. Her breathing turned shallow. Her mascara smeared. The children hovered in the doorway, then disappeared upstairs when Mark told them to give us a minute. I set my phone on the table and knelt so we were eye level. She would not look at me. Her gaze stayed locked on the grain of the wood, as if the lines there could carry her away. "I did not mean to hurt you," she whispered. I kept telling myself it was temporary. A few white lies. Just until people got used to me. He won too. "Temporary has a way of becoming permanent," I said. My voice came out calm, but my chest burned. Mark stood by the counter, silent now. He looked smaller without the glow of his laptop. He kept glancing at the images on my phone, then at Claire, then at me. His confidence did not help him here. Claire wiped at her cheeks and finally met my eyes. "Do you know what it is like to walk into rooms where everyone has a story that sounds the same? The schools, the vacations, the family names. They ask where you are from. And they are not asking about geography. They want to know if you belong." I never knew how to answer. So I borrowed answers from other people. "You had your own," I said. "They were enough." I thought they were not." She drew a shaky breath. "When we moved in, the first week, Mrs. Carter invited me to a book club. She asked about my parents. I said my mother passed. She asked about my father. I said he still lived in Ohio. She smiled in that way people do when they are measuring. Then she said, "And what does he do?" I told the truth. I said you worked construction and sometimes took any job that kept food on the table. She nodded and said it was admirable. Then she never invited me again. He would fively. The noose. The words landed heavy between us. I wanted to tell her that one woman's coldness did not define her life. But I also knew how small and alone a person can feel when a door closes for a reason that has nothing to do with your character. She kept going, as if a gate had opened and could not be closed. Mark's mother asked me at Thanksgiving to please be careful how I describe our background. She said people can be cruel. She said some clients care about image. She told me to think of the children's future. She gave me a speech about polishing the story. The next week at dinner, I told Mark, Maybe we should say you were a friend. He did not argue. He said it might be easier. Well, Mark rubbed his forehead. I told myself I was protecting the family. He said, I told myself it was only about privacy. He swallowed hard. It was also about pride. Well, Claire nodded without looking at him. I hid pictures because I did not know how to explain them. The house back home, the work clothes, the birthdays where we blew out candles on cupcakes because we could not afford a cake. I thought if I kept everything new and shiny, no one would see the cracks in me. Says, there were no cracks in you. I said, there was only history. Says, she shut her eyes. Tears pooled again. Do you remember the winter I wanted a blue coat with fur on the hood? You said, maybe next month. Then you came home the next night with the coat. Later I found your old jacket in the trash because the zipper had broken. I asked why you threw it out. You said it had done its job. I have thought about that coat 1,000 times since we moved here. Every time someone made me feel small. I promised myself my children would never feel that. So I made our story smaller instead. In breasting, I sat back on my heels. The memory of that night came rushing in. The store lights. The last bill in my wallet. Her face in the mirror when she tried the coat on. The way she skipped down the sidewalk and slipped her hand into mine. It is not wrong to want your kids safe, I said. But safety built on shame cannot hold. He won't decide to see, she nodded. As if something written inside her finally made sense in simple words. I told you to pretend to be a friend because I was ashamed of the person who never once let me go hungry. I was ashamed of the man who sold his tools so I could go to school. Do you hear how insane that is? I hate myself for it. He won't decide to see. I shook my head. Do not hate yourself. Learn. Then choose different. He won't decide to see. She cried harder. Her shoulders shook. Mark brought a glass of water and set it beside her. He did not try to touch her. He knew he had his own part in this. His voice, when it came, was quiet. I should have stopped this the first time we talked about the story. I liked the neat version. I liked how it looked. I did not ask what it cost. I reached out my hand. Claire hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers in my palm, like a child walking across ice. I helped her to her feet, and we sat at the table, the same table where I had felt like a stranger the night before. Noah's soft cry floated from upstairs, and something inside me loosened. A baby does not care about image. A baby knows how to reach for love. Claire whispered. I do not want to lose you. Tell me I have not already lost you. Add D1 head. You have not. I said. But we cannot keep going like this. We will tell the truth or we will not speak. I will not live inside a lie under a roof I paid for. Add D1 head. She nodded fast. Desperate to agree. Yes, truth. I will tell the neighbors. I will tell the school. I will tell anyone who asks. The quite is just. You will start by telling yourself. I said. You will stop judging the girl you used to be. That girl carried books on a bus while holding her mother's hand. That girl learned how to be brave. Do not throw her away. The quite is just. Mark pulled out a chair and sat across from us, looking like a man who just found out the ground he stood on was not his. What do you want us to do today? He asked. Not in theory. Today. Having not. Today you put the pictures back. I said. All of them. Even the ones that do not match the furniture. Having not. Claire almost laughed through her tears. I kept them. She said. I could not bear to throw them out. They are in a box in the garage. Having not. Then bring them inside. I said. Put our life on the wall. Having not. She stood. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked older and younger all at once. Then she walked to the door that led to the garage. She paused and turned back. Dad, I am sorry. My Manny for 7 done. I know, I said. Now show me. My Manny for 7 done. She nodded and disappeared through the door. Mark stared at the contract photo still glowing on my phone. Whatever happens next, he said, I will not fight the truth. My Manny for 7 done. Good, I answered. Because the truth is the only thing that will give this house a real future. My Manny for 7 done. Upstairs, Noah's cry faded into soft babble. The sound moved through the rooms like light through a window. I sat at the table and waited for my daughter to come back with our history in her arms. That night the house was quiet again. But it no longer felt like the museum I had walked into days earlier. The walls still gleamed. The furniture still looked untouched. But something had shifted. A box sat open on the living room floor. Photos spread across the coffee table. Claire had brought them in from the garage, like I asked. We looked through them together, even if she cried at nearly every picture. After she went upstairs, I stayed alone with those photos. One showed her in high school, holding a softball bat too big for her frame, grinning proudly while I stood behind her in a sun-faded cap. Another captured her in her graduation gown, my arm tight around her shoulders, tears streaking both our faces. Proof of a life we had built without marble countertops or perfect lawns. Proof that none of this came from nowhere. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark. My thoughts kept circling the same question. What now? I had the documents, the proof, the legal right to everything under this roof. I could claim the house today. Tell them to pack up. Remind them who held the foundation. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Noah's hand reaching for me at the dinner table. His innocent smile, unshaken by the lies or the fear. Did I want to punish him for the mistakes of his parents? The answer was no. I did not want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted my place restored, my sacrifices acknowledged, and more than that, I wanted my grandson to grow up knowing the truth. Not a story polished for neighbors, but the real history that built him a future. In the morning, I called an old friend from back home, a lawyer I trusted. I explained everything. The contracts, the payments, the documents I had photographed. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, John, you're in control here. You could take it all tomorrow. But sometimes control isn't about what you can take. It's about what you choose to give. And those words stayed with me. I walked the neighborhood after that call. Past houses that looked just like Claire's. Past families waving politely from their driveways. I thought about how much effort they put into keeping everything shiny on the outside. I wondered how many of them were hiding truths of their own. By the time I came back, my decision was clear. I would not strip this house away from Claire and her children. I would not fight Mark in court for walls that did not matter as much as the people inside them. Instead, I would create something stronger. I would take the ownership that was mine and reshape it into a promise not to Claire, not to Mark, but to the child who reached for me without shame. That night at dinner, when the children were upstairs and the table was cleared, I looked at them both and said, I've made up my mind. I'm not selling. I'm not taking the house away, but I am changing what it means. From this point forward, the house belongs to the future, not the lies of the past. It will go to Noah one day, with conditions that will make him worthy of it. Create. Mark frowned, unsure. But he didn't interrupt. Claire leaned forward, her eyes wide. What do you mean? I mean that this house will never again be a stage for pretending. It will stand as proof of sacrifice, of hard work, of truth. And when Noah is old enough to understand where he came from, it will be his. But only if he earns it. See. End way. The words settled over the room like the weight of stone. Heavy, but solid. Claire pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling fresh. Mark lowered his gaze, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt something inside me ease. Not victory, not revenge, but the quiet strength of a decision that would outlast all of us. The following week moved in slow, deliberate steps. I spent mornings at the kitchen table, with stacks of documents spread before me. The same table where I had once felt invisible. Now it had become my workbench. Each paper I signed, each note I made, was another nail hammered into the framework of a new foundation. My lawyer, Michael, guided me through the process over the phone. "We'll set up an educational trust," he explained. "The property will be placed into it, with you as trustee, until your grandson reaches the required age. You can decide the conditions. Unstrecte, then write this down," I said firmly. "He inherits the house at 25, but only if he earns a college degree. No shortcuts. No gifts. He has to build something of his own before he can claim what I built for him." Michael paused, then chuckled softly. "That's one of the stricter conditions I've heard, but it makes sense. John, it ensures he'll value it, not just live in it." Day by day. The papers came together. Claire hovered in the background, watching me with red-rimmed eyes. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes she said nothing at all. I noticed the way she handled the old photographs she had brought out of the garage. She dusted the frames, arranged them on the mantel alongside the newer ones, as if stitching two halves of her life back together. Mark avoided me for the most part, but when our paths crossed, his tone had changed. The arrogance in his voice was gone. He treated me less like a nuisance and more like a man whose word carried weight. Once, I caught him staring at the contract spread across the table. He looked up and said quietly, "You're giving us more grace than we deserve, and therefore, I'm not giving this to you." I replied, "I'm giving it to your son. Don't confuse the two." He nodded, and for the first time since I met him, he had nothing else to add. When the trust documents were finally complete, Michael overnighted the final versions for my signature. I sat with a pen in my hand, staring at the lines where my name belonged. My chest tightened as memories surged the long nights on scaffolds, the calluses splitting on my palms, the sound of Claire's laugh when she was still small enough to ride on my shoulders. Every mark of pain, every sacrifice, it all funneled into this moment. I pressed the pen to paper and signed. My name flowed steady and bold across the page. Ownership transformed into legacy. The house was no longer simply a roof over Claire's carefully built life. It was a promise to the grandson who had reached for me with open hands. Claire sat across from me, tears shining in her eyes. "Dad, I don't deserve this. After everything I did, after how I treated you, this isn't about what you deserve," I said. "It's about what he deserves. I want him to grow up knowing that foundations matter more than appearances. That work means more than status. If he learns that, then every sacrifice I made will finally mean something lasting." She covered her face with her hands and sobbed quietly. I let her cry. Some lessons sink in only when the tears wash them clean. Later, I folded the documents neatly, slid them into the envelope, and sealed it shut. The sound was final, like the closing of a door behind me. But this wasn't the end. It was the start of something stronger than pride, stronger than shame. The house would stand, and one day, when Noah was ready, it would stand for him not as a monument to lies, but as a testament to truth. The first signs of change came quietly. One afternoon, I found Claire sitting on the living room floor with Noah in her lap. holding up a photograph from years ago. It was the picture of her in a paper crown at her 10th birthday. Both of us laughing with cake smeared across our faces. She looked at Noah and said softly, "That's your grandpa. He made everything possible." Her voice cracked on the word grandpa, but she did not take it back. The older kids watched from the stairs. Emily, who had barely spoken to me since my arrival, whispered, "That's you?" When I nodded, she hesitated. Then came closer. Tyler followed. They studied the old photos scattered on the carpet, me with grease on my hands. Claire in a graduation gown. The small house we once lived in. For the first time, they asked questions. Real questions. "You built that porch? You paid for Mom's school? You really worked 3 jobs?" I told them the truth. Not polished. Not softened, just the truth. And they listened. Their eyes shifted as the story of who I was replaced the fiction of a nameless friend. Mark, too, seemed different. He no longer rushed past me in the mornings. Instead, he lingered, asking about the projects I used to manage, the way I handled long hours without losing hope. He even joined me one evening in the garage, where I had set up a small workbench. He watched quietly as I repaired a loose drawer from the kitchen. "You know," he said finally, "I used to think money was the only kind of foundation that mattered. I see now I was wrong." Arda, Claire changed most of all. She no longer hid when neighbors stopped by. One Saturday, she introduced me to Mrs. Carter, the same woman who had once dismissed her. "This is my father," she said clearly, her hand resting on my arm. "He built the life that gave me everything." The words stunned me. They also stunned Mrs. Carter, whose polite smile faltered before she recovered. But Claire did not look away. And for once, I saw no shame in her eyes. At dinner that night, the table felt different. The children put their phones aside without being asked. Claire set my old oatmeal cookies on the counter, not hidden in a cabinet. Noah squealed when he saw me, reaching across the table with sticky hands. And when his small fingers touched mine, Claire smiled instead of pulling him back. The photographs had returned to the walls, not in the garage, not buried in boxes, but in plain view. They did not match the furniture, and they did not need to. They belonged. For the first time since I arrived, I felt like I belonged too. Not as a guest, not as a shadow, but as a father, a grandfather, a man whose sacrifices had not been erased. I knew trust would take time. Wounds that deep do not heal overnight. But every question from the children, every quiet conversation with Mark, every moment Claire allowed the truth to stand. It was a brick laid back into the foundation of family. And this time, I knew it would hold. The weeks that followed carried a rhythm I had never expected to feel in that house. It started small morning coffee with Claire at the kitchen table, where she no longer avoided my eyes. She asked about my work, about the years she had missed, and I answered with stories that made her laugh and sometimes cry. The wall between us thinned each day until, finally, there was no wall at all. Mark softened too. He was still a man of schedules and late-night phone calls. But now he paused before disappearing into his office. Once, he came home from court with his tie loosened and sat beside me on the porch. "You know," he said, staring at the manicured lawns, "I thought winning cases and making partner would mean everything. But the way Noah lights up when he sees you, it makes me wonder what I've been chasing." His words carried no performance. For the first time, they were simply honest. The older children grew curious. Emily asked me to help with a school project on American architecture, and I showed her how to sketch a floor plan. Tyler, usually restless, followed me into the garage, and watched as I sanded down a piece of wood. "Can I try?" he asked. And when I handed him the sandpaper, he worked with surprising care. Each small moment stitched me deeper into their lives. Claire began calling me more often, even when I was back home. Some nights, she'd cry quietly over the phone, apologizing again and again. Other nights, she'd share stories about the children, about the way Noah pointed to my photo and said "Papa" before bed. Every call, no matter how brief, was another board laid across the gap that had separated us for so long. I noticed changes in the house, too. The walls now carried photographs from every part of Claire's life, not just the polished vacations, but also the birthdays in our small kitchen, the day she got her college letter, even one of me in my work boots holding her hand. The house felt warmer, less like a stage, more like a home. On Thanksgiving, Claire insisted I carve the turkey. The children gathered close, watching as if it were a tradition they had always known. Mark raised a glass and said, "To family, to the truth that holds us together." The words struck me harder than any toast I had ever heard. That night, as the dishes clattered in the sink and laughter echoed down the hall, I sat quietly on the porch. The air was cool, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. For the first time in years, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen, the shame, the anger. The years of silence, they were still part of me, but they no longer owned me. Healing is never quick, but in that moment, with my grandson asleep upstairs and my daughter laughing in the kitchen, I believed it was possible. We had begun again, and this time, we were building on solid ground. Winter came with sharp winds and streets glittering under Christmas lights. I returned to my own small house for a while, but calls from Claire kept me connected. She sent photos daily, Noah building block towers, Emily holding up her first sketch of a bridge, Tyler proudly showing a wooden box he had finished sanding. Each message carried a piece of the life I had once feared I had lost forever. When December arrived, Claire called with a request that caught me off guard. "Dad, we want Christmas at your place this year. The kids want to see where I grew up." Noah's been saying, "Papa's house" every morning. Her voice carried both excitement and a trace of nerves, as though asking me for something fragile. I prepared carefully. My home was modest, nothing like their grand suburban house, but it was honest. I scrubbed the old floors, polished the worn table, and hung a few handmade ornaments that had survived from Claire's childhood. When they arrived, the children ran through the rooms with wide eyes, marveling at the tiny details I had long stopped noticing. "It feels cozy," Emily said, curling up on the couch. Tyler tugged open the garage door and grinned at the shelves of tools, whispering, "This looks cooler than Dad's office." That night, we ate simple food, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, cookies I had baked the same way I used to when Claire was little. There was no chandelier, no polished silver, only laughter and warmth filling every corner. After dinner, I brought out an old shoebox from the closet. Inside were photos and small keepsakes I had saved over the years. Claire's high school report card, yellowed with age, a Father's Day card written in crayon, a picture of her in that blue winter coat she once begged for. I handed the box to her. Her hands shook as she lifted each piece, tears sliding silently down her face. "You kept all of this," she whispered. "Of course," I said. "These are the bricks we built our life on." 5 head sower. Noah climbed into my lap then, his tiny hands gripping my shirt. He looked up at me with eyes full of innocence and trust, and clear as the church bells ringing in the distance. He said, "Grandpa." "Ask and stew." The word tore through me, not with pain, but with a flood of relief so deep I could hardly breathe. Claire covered her mouth and sobbed openly. Mark bowed his head, his arm around her shoulders. The other children clapped softly, as if they understood the importance of the moment. I pulled Noah closer, my chest shaking with the force of it all. For years, I had been erased, hidden, replaced by a lie. But here, in this small house filled with old memories, the truth had returned to life. My grandson's first clear word for me was the proof that nothing had been wasted. Claire leaned close, whispering through her tears, "You were never just an old friend. You were always the foundation. And now everyone knows." I kissed the top of Noah's head and held him tighter. The years of sacrifice, the nights of loneliness, the pain of rejection, all of it led here, to this single word spoken with pure love. "Grandpa."